Up next, we're going to look at all of the veins that drain the blood back to the heart. We're going to skip the superficial veins that we covered way back at the beginning of chapter 19, I think it was, when we started talking about blood. So just think back and remember the cephalic and basilic and median cubital veins we talked about in the upper limb, as well as the great saphenous and small saphenous veins that we saw in the lower limb. Okay, we're not going to draw them, but they are important. So first, let's take a look at all of the veins that drain to the superior vena cava, okay? So we're going to have a heart down here, and here's going to be our superior vena cava. The two veins that unite to form the superior vena cava are the right and left brachiocephalic veins. So we only have one brachiocephalic artery on the right side, but for the veins we have one on the right and left side. Both brachiocephalic veins are formed by the union of a subclavian vein and an internal jugular vein. So here's our subclavian. That's draining the upper limb. The internal jugular is draining the head. And it looks funny because the brachiocephalic vein on the left side is a lot longer because it just has to cross over more area in order to reach this right brachiocephalic vein to dump into the heart. I'm not going to draw them because they totally parallel the arteries that we've already talked about. But if you continue further distally down the upper limb, you would find an axillary vein that's connected to the subclavian vein, a brachial vein that's connected to that, and then the radial and ulnar veins as well. So once you get past the subclavian, right? So this is weird. This is different from arteries to veins. Once you get out into the upper limb, the arteries and veins are paralleling each other very well, minus the fact that there's extra subcutaneous veins and no subcutaneous arteries. Now let's look at everything that drains to the inferior vena cava. So here we'll have a diaphragm. Here we'll have an inferior vena cava. Okay, so down in the lower limb, the femoral vein, popliteal vein, tibial veins, and fibular vein, again, just like the upper limb, all of those are going to parallel the arteries, so we're not going to draw them. We're really just focusing on the stuff that's weird in the venous system that's different from the arterial system. So here's our inferior vena cava, and here are our two common iliac veins that are draining into the inferior vena cava. And always think about which way blood is moving, okay? So this is a vein, so blood is coming back towards the heart. Let's do the easier paired veins first. So more superiorly, oh, what happened there? There we go. More superiorly, we've got renal veins. And then here's a kind of funny venous thing. On the right side, the gonadal vein drains straight into the inferior vena cava, and on the left side, it drains into the left renal vein, okay? Because think about it, the whole inferior vena cava is pretty right-shifted. It's over on the right side of the vertebral column, and so it's easier for this gonadal vein to drain straight here than it is for it to come all the way over and drain to the inferior vena cava. Now let's look at our unpaired veins. And these ones get even weirder, right? So that's a diaphragm, the green line I just drew. Here's a liver. We're going to make a really simplified liver. All right, so we talked about the superior mesenteric arteries inferior mesenteric artery, and the celiac trunk, and those are all branches of the aorta. So they're taking blood out to structures of the gut tube, and coming back from those, we're going to have veins of the same name, but instead of draining to the inferior vena cava, they got to go to the liver first, because the blood in them is really nutrient and possibly toxin rich, and so we need to clean that up before we send it back into systemic circulation. So we have got a splenic vein coming this way from the spleen, which will unite with the superior mesenteric vein. Those join together to become the hepatic portal vein. Okay. The inferior mesenteric artery drains up to the splenic artery usually. Inferior mesenteric vein drains up to the splenic vein. Those all dump into the liver, and then eventually, I'm going to do the inferior vena cava in black here, so this is going to be behind all of this. Eventually there's a little vein called the hepatic vein, which will drain this over to the inferior vena cava, and then back up to the heart. Alright, those are all our veins. In our next video, we're going to do coronary circulation and fetal circulation.